in a small town some miles away. Yep, that's all I know. When I came into the bank this morning like I always do, there was the boss and the safe was wide open. I raised the alarm and we hanged a few fellers right away, but the thief got clear. After the robbery, he got away through the window. Say, look at his footprints. A dead giveaway. See that? Just one raw of nails on the right boot. With tracks like that, we'll soon catch him. Madre de Dios, these footsteps, they give me away pronto, pronto. What to do? Oh, caramba, un hombre. Ojo, he's sleeping. Bueno, bueno. Pedro, he think he has a very, very good idea. If he wake, if he move, I shoot him. He's done. Now Pedro not have to worry anymore. Up we go. Siesta's finished. Come on, Snowy, on our way. Hello, what an extraordinary thing. These aren't my boots. They have nails, and spurs as well. How very peculiar. I can't understand it. It's really quite extraordinary. Look at these tracks. I'd say he was trying to disguise them, but he can't fool us. We'll soon catch up with him. Extraordinary. Stop! Huh? Okay, buddy, you're under arrest. What? But why? I protest. You protest, huh? What about the old West Bank? And the manager? And the loot? We'll be back in town by dark. They're back! They're back! They got the bank robber! String 'em up! Nothing we can do, Fred. It's a lynch mob. Heave ho! Snap. Go on, laugh. It could happen to anybody. One of director Steven Spielberg's masterworks is an adaptation of a classic 1930s adventure story, full of rip-roaring adventures, racist and dated stereotypes, a fun and seemingly indestructible lead character. And no, I'm not talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, but of Tintin. Yes, Tintin, the animated film. It's a rollicking good time. Highly recommend. But until that point, that was the only real way that I had ever engaged with the classic comic character of Tintin. He is, of course, a Franco-Belgian comic by the cartoonist Hergé, which is a pseudonym for the letters R. G, I believe, or RJ, which is his real name, and I am too lazy to look up right now. That's that usual in-depth research that you can come to expect from me, of course. But Tintin is beloved. It's one of those stories that's been translated into languages and published in editions across the globe. So why is Tintin so successful? How did it come to define the art style of a generation? Well, today I've looked at a volume of Tintin to examine just that question. And if you like the work that I'm doing here, please support my channel by subscribing so that you can catch future installments of my video channel. Like this video to boost it in the algorithm, and comment with some of your favorite Franco-Belgian stories. If you are an expert in Tintin and have read any of these stories, let me know which ones I should read that I didn't read for this video. You can also support my work by throwing me a few dollars over on Patreon, get your name thrown in at the end of this video. You can find my writing over at my blog, spikestonehand.com. There I talk about new comics that are coming out, my thoughts on various comics industry items and happenings of note, and share the love with other podcasts and YouTubes that I think are worth your time listening. But without further ado, let's dig into Tintin. Hello, my name is Steven, but you might better know me by my superhero alter ego, Spike Stonehand. And welcome to my channel, Divining Comics, where I explore the magic hidden between the panels of your favorite comics.
Boys and girls, your attention, please. Presenting a new exciting radio program featuring the thrilling adventures of an amazing and incredible personality.
If this is your first time here, welcome. I am in the middle of a year-long series where I am looking at 52 comics from across the globe and across the history of the medium in order to expand my knowledge of the breadth and depth of what comics are capable of. And if you'd like to join me in the 52 Comics Challenge, I have a full list of all the categories in the description below. It's like the Criterion Challenge, if you've heard of that, but for comics. There you go. Join in and let me know what some of the comics you're reading are. But today we start Adventure Month. I know my timing is a little bit off with a move and other things. Life goes on. Things are a little bit delayed. I have found my hats, as you can tell, but I have not yet set up a good recording location, and the lighting is a little bit off still, unfortunately, but that'll happen until I finish unpacking everything. But let's dig into Tintin comics. I read the first volume in a 7-volume complete collected Tintin edition. I just got it from my library. It looks something like this. So it has within it 3 complete and relatively standalone Tintin stories: Tintin America, Cigars of the Pharaoh, and The Blue Lotus. And the last 2 series do sort of connect with one another, but overall, these stories are very readable on their own. If you happen to have a different edition where you just find one volume, they're all, I think, designed to be pretty standalone. So what happens in these volumes? I think it is pretty typical of the things that Tintin is known for. He goes to a new region that isn't the boring old Europe where he is from. Or the Hergé, the creator, did a certain amount of research to get an assortment of more or less factually true, or at least factually interesting information about the region that Tintin is visiting. He solves a mystery, goes on an adventure, fights crime, aids the police, gets hijinks ensue, all before things wrap up tidily at the end. In the first volume, Tintin in America, he goes to Chicago primarily and fights crime. He breaks up the Chicago mob. He ends up chasing a specific mob leader across America, so you get some bits that are more Wild West inspired. I guess you have to do that if you're a European writing a story set in America. You got to explore both the city and the frontier, right? That's kind of that combination of the two is the American ethos, the infinite frontier, plus the hustle and bustle of major cities like Chicago, New York. In the second volume, the Cigars of the Pharaoh obviously starts, as the name would suggest, in Egypt, but he travels through various parts of the Middle East, all the way down across through the Strait of Hormuz and into India. So that's he solves kind of a mystery there of this drug trafficking, opium mystery that's going on. And there's the leader of this drug trafficking organization gets away at the end of the volume, and he is the primary mystery antagonist in the third one, The Blue Lotus, which, as the name might suggest, takes place primarily in East Asia, in Hong Kong, and in parts in Japan, or at least there's a lot of Japanese characters in Hong Kong. There's not really a whole lot of major recurring characters. Obviously, you have Tintin himself, his dog Snowy. There's a couple of bumbling cops, Thompson and Thompson, spelled differently, of course, that are in both volumes. There's a couple of minor recurring characters, especially since the second and third story in this edition do tell a somewhat ongoing narrative. So there's a few minor characters that cross over between them, but for the most part, it's just Tintin and it's just Snowy. And a big thing that makes these stories work is obviously that lead character, Tintin. He is your classic heart of gold adventurer, but I think one of the things that is so interesting about him, so fun about him, is the dynamic in his confrontations with those who intend to do him harm. He is at the same time incredibly naive and trusting, kind of open-hearted, and at the same time there's a running gag that despite looking kind of like just a boy, just a scrawny little thing, he is able to physically defeat pretty much anybody in a fair fight, or an unfair fight, as is often the case here. There's actually a recurring bit where 3 big tough guys will come in to take Tintin down, and they'll fight off screen, and they'll call, the ambulance and say, oh, there was, a brutal fight. You need to bring the ambulance over right now. And you think, oh, poor Tintin, only to find out that it was the 3 ruffians that are now needing to spend an extended amount of time in the hospital, and not Tintin, who is unscathed. The other thing that I think makes Tintin work is the Looney Tunes-ness of it all. I've kind of alluded a bit to some of the silly gags that are present in these stories, but that is one of the main appeals of this. Tintin, as you saw in the intro video, will find himself in these absurd situations of mistaken identity where he's about to be hanged because someone thought he was a criminal when he wasn't, and only for the rope that's hanging him and his little dog, Snowy, to snap. And there's a lot of comic moments like that scattered throughout, moments of subversion, right? There's one where you think it's going to do the Orientalist trope of these, quote unquote savage Middle Eastern men that are harassing a nice European blonde woman, and Tintin goes in to save the woman only to find out it was a film set and these were all actors, right? It's kind of subverting the expectation. It's your classic comedy bit there, and also having an interesting kind of hint at maybe a progressive anti-racist message, though of course it is obligatory to mention when you're reading these volumes there is a lot of what we would definitely now say are racist depictions, especially of black characters, of African characters, and even of a lot of the Asian and Middle Eastern characters. There's definitely, generously speaking, broad stereotypes drawn about the kind of mystic Indians or sage Chinese men, right? It's all very broadly drawn, and I think that there are parts where you can tell like this subversive scene and the film scene that you can tell that Hergé is not necessarily himself someone that has hatred in his heart, but it's definitely a blind spot that he had, and something that we today would want to contend with and critique. But I think that we can still approach these volumes without necessarily only focusing on those moments. One last thing on the writing is, if you're reading these kind of 64 or so page albums, as they call them over in Europe, you'll notice that, at least to me, it felt like this was originally serialized. I, again, am too lazy right now in the middle of the night to do the research and tell you if it actually is originally a serialized edition, maybe published in newspapers and compiled later. But kind of every 3 pages or so, you're in an entirely new scene, an entirely new sequence. And on the one hand, that provides for an incredible amount of joke density, of bit density. These pages have 12, 15 panels on them. There's a lot happening and a lot of funny moments happening at a very quick pace. On the other hand, it can be kind of all over the place, a very jumbled narrative. It doesn't have that kind of tight cohesion that you might expect if you've only ever read much more modern graphic novels and European comic albums. And speaking of the number of panels, I think that that's one of the artistic decisions that really benefits this comic the most. Like I said, there is a very high joke density, and so you'll have a number of pages where the last panel is almost a throwaway punchline panel that then they kind of ignore and move on the next page. But it feels very similar to newspaper comics in a sense where you kind of get the last panel is your punchline, or maybe even a reaction to the punchline in the penultimate panel. And I think that that's in something like a newspaper strip, there's only so much you can do there. But in a big page, again, where you're having 12, 15 or more panels, you really can use those kind of extra moments for a bit of levity, to spice things up, to add some more jokes to an otherwise plot-heavy page. And I think that Hergé does that really well here. Of course, his art style is one of the most defining things about him. I believe they termed it ligne claire after his time as the kind of premier artist of the Franco-Belgian comic scene. It is pure simplicity, right? There's no lines that don't need to be there. It feels like everything is stripped down to its most barest parts. And so when you do have the racist depictions of Africans and black people, like I mentioned before, there's nothing there to hide it. It is just the simple racist caricature. But in the moments where it really works, the action sequences, it really sings in a way that you can see how this went on to become kind of the defining style of the European comics art scene for so long. And as I mentioned as well, a lot of these jokes do have a kind of Looney Tunes-esque quality to them. One of the ones that I particularly remember liking was in the Chicago mob scene. There's a bit where a mobster is pretending to be a police officer, and he takes Tintin into this room, and there's a sign on the wall that says police officers union or something like that, right? So Tintin walks in thinking everything's okay, but once he goes in, the door closes, and the mobster takes the sign off the door. Now it says the Gang Association of Chicago, and it's like, why would the gangs have a sign on the door that this is where they meet? That seems kind of silly, but it works on a Looney Tunes level, not on a purely literal depiction of reality level, and in a way that it's fun. It's all ages kind of humor that, just like your Looney Tunes, just like the old adventure serials that went on to inspire, yes, Indiana Jones, which is very similar to this, just minus the comedy, right? Tintin has comedy, Indiana Jones is serious, but they're both cut from that same kind of adventure cloth. And it's something that I'm going to be continuing to explore in the next few weeks as I look at other adventure comics, especially a lot of those that come from various European countries. So moving to wrap things up, would I continue reading Tintin? It's not necessarily stories that I get the most depth out of. They're short and easy and breezy. There's not necessarily a lot of thematic meat to chew on, but if you're just in for a good time, if you're reading this comic to kids, maybe skipping some of the parts that are more problematic, like I mentioned, I think that there's a lot to recommend here. But as an adult that likes things maybe with a little bit more thematic heft, this isn't necessarily going to be my first choice to keep reading. But if you had the time, there are plenty of worse things you could read. So who would I recommend this for? Obviously, like I said, it's an all-ages thing. If you like that kind of adventure serial, if you like exploring the world in different cultures, I'm sure there are probably more modern examples that are less problematic that do that same thing. But this is a classic for a reason. It does that very well on an artistic and storytelling level. And like I said, it kind of has that kind of frenetic, always changing, always something happening plot style that I do think really appeals to younger readers. Thank you for watching this video. If you could, please support this channel in the ways that I mentioned before. Like, subscribe, and comment below with some of your favorite adventure serials. Until next time, keep reading comics and never let the magic of comics die.
Old Enoch, he lived to be 365 when the Lord came and took him back to heaven alive. I saw the light from heaven shining all around. I saw the light come shining. I saw that light come down.